Welcome, everyone. It is May 23rd, and we are here at the Jones Health and Safety Committee meeting, and we're going to create this slide deck as we go along. And we don't have everyone here, but we do have a couple people here from our permanent committee. We don't have enough for a quorum, so we're not going to take any votes today. Is that right? Or how many, since Violet has left? We could do roll call. So Daniel. Ms. Llewellyn.
Here.
Lenny is here. Dr. Plunkett is not here. And Rachel Zen is not here. And then we have Violet, whose last day was a little while ago. So she won't join us today. We have April minutes. We don't have enough people to approve them. We have community announcements. We have a couple items on the agenda, including safety of Jones. We do not have Mr. Mitchell here for the whole school safety plan. I see Rachel coming in now. We're going to go through the culture and climate department updates, and then we're going to go into a conversation about where this committee has been and recommendations moving forward. At this time, we can have some community announcements, and I welcome everyone here on the call, including Deborah Land, and thank you for your presentation a couple meetings ago. And I was hoping that you could give us some updates.
Sure. The areas that I'm particularly interested in that relate to health and safety are relating to students with 504s or elevator passes or IEPs. So my understanding from the administration, we got an answer of how many students at Jones have an elevator pass. It's about 150 students out of our 1,960 students have elevator passes. And the two areas that I'm concerned about right now regarding elevators, we've talked about the issue of accessibility to the proposed new student lounge area, which is outside of the North Auditorium on the second floor. The only handicap accessible route to get up there is this keyed service elevator that is in the North building. And this last week, they had an outage of that elevator. When my daughter needed to ride the elevator didn't work. And so I brought that to the attention of administration, who then took it to the engineers, who came back to me and said that by the end of the day, the elevator would be working again. So my daughter next checked the elevator on Friday, and on Friday, the elevator was turned on. I guess you could say it was working. She said the first time she called the elevator, the door opened about an inch and then slammed shut again. So she had to call it again, and then the door slowly jerked open, and she got in and went upstairs, and the door slowly jerked open, and she was glad to get out. I'm not sure that elevator is going to pass an elevator inspection, and so I raised that again to administration on Friday. I said, the good news is it's running. The bad news is I don't think this is safe, and I'm not sure what would happen if my student got locked in the elevator and nobody would notice. So we still have some more to figure out about accessibility to that particular area of our campus, because since that's an area that's proposed for a student lounge, if students can't get there on their own easily and safely, I think we have a fundamental issue. So I've asked that they please work with the engineers in the district to do a scheduled maintenance of that elevator. They need to figure out what's wrong with it and fix it. The second thing that I learned about last week, with the 150 students that have elevator passes, I don't think all of them have emergency evacuation plans. We had a fire drill at Jones on Monday. And my student was on the 5th floor in the South building and had to walk down the stairs from the 5th floor. And since our building is extra high stories, it was like walking 10 flights of stairs to come down. And that has caused substantial additional disability to her because of that. And so I went back to the case manager and back to the IEP 504 team and the school physical therapist saying, wait a minute, aren't all the kids who have elevator passes, shouldn't we have evacuation plans in place? Because my daughter's elevator pass isn't new this year, but she never had an evacuation plan. And so I'm still waiting to hear from them. They told me they would meet about this last week, Thursday, and I don't know because nobody's reached out to me. I reached out to them Friday afternoon and I haven't heard back to see what the outcome was. But I think we have a fundamental issue. If we have 150 students that are depending on elevators, granted, some of them have different reasons why they use an elevator. If you have asthma, that may be one thing, but if you have mechanical, physical mobility issues, that's another. And I'm concerned that if my student didn't have an evacuation plan, there are probably others who didn't as well. And I think we need to make sure that that's addressed. So those are my two updates regarding elevators at Jones.
Thanks, Deborah. And I see that Mr. Mitchell joined. I'm not sure how much you caught about that or how much you know about what Deborah is reporting about elevators, but is there, how much did you hear?
I caught the last, excuse me, good evening. I caught the last little bit that she was referring in terms to individual evacuation plans.
Okay, the other piece of my discussion before the individual evacuation plans was about the North Building service elevator, that it was out of service entirely on Wednesday last week. And when my daughter went back on Friday, it was in service, but it's really rickety and the doors were not functioning properly. And so I'm concerned that elevator wouldn't pass inspection. And so I've wrote back to the administration on Friday morning asking that they please address the safety issue, because what I don't want, if my kid is the only one using that elevator, I don't want her to get stuck in the elevator and have nobody notice that she's trapped.
It is my understanding that the engineers were made aware of your additional request. Like I saw the email that went out. Additionally, in all the elevators, and I believe this applies to the service elevator as well. If you should hit the call button, it does connect directly to CPS, safety and security, who will then do two things simultaneously. They will make a 911 call to the fire department, and they will also contact the school to alert the school that there is someone trapped in the elevator. So that they'll do one of those two things if not done simultaneously.
That's very helpful to know, because that was one of Lex's questions, is what happens if, and now I can tell her.
Yeah, it is my understanding, and I know for a fact I've seen it in the South, but I'll double check tomorrow to be able to 100% confirm in the North as well. But when a call button is pressed, it goes directly to CPS, safety and security. And like I said, that security person will assess the situation, and they usually alert the school, and they'll alert 911.
Hi, Rachel.
Hi, everyone. I guess since we're on the topic of the elevators, I wanted to follow up, especially since Mr. Mitchell is here. Hi, Mr. Mitchell. At the LSC meeting I think it was the April meeting, the general meeting, we were talking about students using the elevator who didn't have the pass. And I know that we talked about it during the last Health and Safety Committee meeting as well. And I guess I was just wondering what is kind of the update on that? Has there been like a change in the students who are using it, using the elevators? Because I know that was kind of a concern, that if there were students who didn't need to use them, then the students who did need them maybe weren't getting as the access wasn't as like, there wasn't as much access. I guess what I'm trying to say.
I will say this, for the 7 years I've been at Jones, and for the fact that, the new building in particular, or the newer building, has 7 floors, students who, don't have the appropriate access to elevators have, managed to try to figure out a way to utilize them. This year has been more problematic than others. So have we addressed that? No more than we have previously. We have, 3 weeks of school left. So now we're looking at some things that we can try to put in place to maybe curb some of that for the future. I mean, there are signs posted. We have tried to appeal to, students' greater good, because understanding who the elevators are for, but to no avail. There are just some students who just don't care. And unless you, physically kind of say, hey, show me your elevator pass, get off the elevator kind of thing, it's been, problematic. You've heard other teachers state it. I don't think anything has changed any drastically, since the last conversation. We are aware of it. We deal with it on a day-to-day basis. There's not a quick fix for now until the end of the year. There are definitely some things that we can talk about for the future, but as it relates to at this very moment, there's not a whole lot more that can be done than what has already been done. We've talked about trying to create public service announcements, again, kind of geared towards the kids to remind them yet again, when you, who does not need to use this elevator, is, all of you doing that at the same time, it presents issues for those who actually need access to the elevator. It causes, concerns or issues for those students who do have the appropriate pass getting to class on time. I don't believe teachers are, penalizing students for not getting on time, because they do recognize that the elevators are a problem. But that is pretty much it. It's not something that's solvable between now and the end of the school year.
Ms. Logan.
I just want to add that I did notice a couple of security guards at several different times standing next to the elevators to help, keep students from getting on to the elevators that weren't supposed to be using it. So it seemed helpful.
Thank you both for all of that. Yeah, I definitely totally understand it may be like a cultural change that's needed in terms of, students understanding why they shouldn't use the elevator, as opposed to just being told that they can't, or that it's not for them. And I totally get that takes time. And I mean, just speaking from experience, I was at the school for the LSC meeting in April, and there's a lot of stairs. I was kind of, I immediately understood the appeal of the elevator as an able-bodied person. So I just wanted to bring it up, but I appreciate the updates and totally understand.
Thanks. All right, so we're gonna have Ms. Logan talk about safety at Jones, COVID-related health procedures and policies.
Okay, so I'm going to drop a link that anyone who has the link should be able to see. And then I'll also try to, Lenny, could you maybe stop presenting, and then I'll try to present this document so that I can step us through it. But I have to admit, I haven't done this in a little while, so this is going to take me a little while to remember. Thank gosh, I'm happy that I've forgotten how to do this. Let's see. Let's see. Present is maybe the lower right corner. Where might I find this again?
Yeah, we're going to share screen.
Share screen. Oh, there, the green. My goodness. Okay, and then yeah. Okay. Let's see. Thanks, Lenny. Okay, so did we start at the beginning where it's a Tribune article? Is that what people are seeing?
Yep.
Yeah, okay. So yeah, I heard this article on NPR as I was coming in. So Chicago is expected to increase to a high community level next week. This is a quote from Allison Arwadi. So what does that mean, going to high? Let's see. High means we're supposed to wear a mask indoors in public, consider avoiding higher risk activities such as crowded indoor gatherings, limit gatherings to small numbers, stay up to date with our COVID-19 vaccines, up to date meaning including boosters, get tested if you have symptoms, and added precautions may be needed for people at high risk for severe disease. So in other words, what are we at Jones worried about then? We're worried about our big events. We just had one, which looked wonderfully happy and joyful, was our prom on Saturday. I think I was probably one of 3 people wearing a mask. But it's really hard to wear those gorgeous gowns and have a mask on. So, I understand that. Here's the next article. Basically, the idea that there are schools nearby that are now moving back to their mask mandates. Evanston being the one that just happened a few days ago. And what does this mean? So right now we're at medium. Chicago's at medium. That's because the CDC is still at medium. But if you look at transmission, that's community levels. But if you look at transmission levels, right? So we're now yellow, medium for community levels, but if you look at transmission, we've actually been at high for a little while now. And this is, positivity rates. So I think I might have gone over it, but our positivity rate now in Chicago is 6.4. When we first started looking at these green maps, we were at 0.6. So we're in our surge. We're in our next surge, obviously. But what's the big difference? Big difference is that our students just started to not wear their masks anymore. I mean, don't you agree? I mean, it feels like our students are being super careful. And, now the weather's nice and we feel like, we haven't gotten sick all this time. And now we're looking at some really big events coming up for our seniors. And our vaccinations probably have waned by now. And we're not wearing masks. Don't have our social distancing going. So what are we trying to do? Let's see. So we have our phone bank is perhaps starting up to reach out to our unvaccinated seniors for graduation, because the auditorium theater has a requirement that they are either vaccinated or they've tested over the last 72 hours, something like that, Mr. Mitchell. So the phone bank will hopefully reach out to those seniors who still need to get vaccinated, or let's make sure that they get tested in the right window. Let's just be careful. If they've had COVID in the last 90 days and don't know it, then they'll test positive of their PCR, even though they might not be contagious. So we might try to get that message out that it should be an antigen test versus a PCR test. The KN95 masks. We did get a new supply. Mr. Mitchell wants to order a new supply a few weeks back. So we have lots of masks. We're going to try, Daniel's going to help try to get NHS to do another distribution this week, probably Wednesday morning. And then we have to really think carefully about how we want to message mask wearing at graduation. I did take masks to the prom, and they weren't taken up except for by people. It's funny, people who were walking by from another event, when they saw free KN95 masks, they were jumping at it. So and then we just said, well, fine, we're helping curb the pandemic in other places. But let's see. So if you can help us brainstorm, so they were just set on the desk as the students were checking in. We could have had people rotating through the ballroom trying to hand out masks. It might be a little easier, obviously, at the graduation, because people are sitting right next to each other, people they don't know. Our vaccination rates are pretty high at the school, but we're gonna have lots of families, mixed generational. So we're also worried about getting other people sick. Yeah, so I mean, I don't know even how to proceed on trying to get this message out better, and maybe trying to safeguard our audiences for graduation as well as our graduates. And then we do have a vaccination. We're very close to figuring out a vaccination date. for our clinic. And yeah, at least we're very close to figuring out the hoops we have to jump through. And then lastly here is just what does it look like at Joan, the daily cases. So it looks like we just consistently on a daily basis. Yeah, this is almost a daily basis at point. We get new reported positives. As well as we had a little big blimp here. And this is in comparison to obviously when it was earlier when we were getting zeros back when we were all feeling very comfortable. So I think, Mr. Mitchell, did I miss anything? No. Okay, so we're all hanging in there. If we could just, I mean, if we're just super lucky, maybe we won't get a big spike before, you know, the 2 or 3 weeks we have left. Okay, that's it for me. Oh no. How do I even find a window again and then stop presenting? Let's see. Really, I was much better at this before when remote learning. Let's see.
Thank you for your report.
Thank you.
Rachel?
Yeah, I want to echo the thank you, Cindy, Mr. Logan. I am curious, and I don't know, maybe I missed this while you were going over what you put together. It's just interesting looking at like page 7, where the majority of the positive cases are self-reported as opposed to the testing. And so I'm just curious, like, I don't know why is that the case? That is it just because students are no longer getting tested on a weekly basis, or is it? Yeah, I guess I'm just kind of curious about that.
Well, it's probably twofold, right? As soon as you you become COVID positive, then they don't want you to test for 3 months because you'll always test positive for the next 3 months. That's one thing. The second thing is we've always had a lot of people signed up for testing, but then we haven't been able to get them to come out for the weekly testing. We had an idea of having an announcement, every time the testing happened on Thursdays. And as soon as we almost had that in place, then we had AP testing for 2 weeks, and then we had another for next week or two. We had the testings that happened for our extended times. And so then if we have no bells, then we have no announcements. And so then we would lose those announcements as well. Mr. Mitchell, do you have anything to add about that? So, and then the self-reported, right? I mean, not everyone, but a lot of people are very concerned that the data just really isn't very clean anymore, because how often do people self-report? Not very often at all anymore. So, and it's often asymptomatic. So
I would argue that we still have, when people are, testing positive, they do report to the school. We've, have now a school-based contact tracing team, meaning that when someone does self-report, we get a communication, we pass it to the contact tracing team, who then does the follow-up. So things are happening a little more faster as relates to from the period of time that people self-report to when teachers are aware, and so I would say that communication has improved slightly with that development. As relates to our numbers and testing, I mean, testing has gone down. When we tend to have spikes, testing will increase. We do have, as Ms. Alaga mentioned, the rapid test. So there are students who have requested those. I don't know what the results are, but we have a pretty healthy supply of rapid tests, and so some students are being more responsible. So there may be a small outbreak. If they know someone who knows someone who has COVID, they'll come and ask for a rapid test We still have our Thursday testing dates scheduled as well. So I say all that to say that I still believe that, people are still self-reporting, but I do believe that because they're asymptomatic, it doesn't have the same level of panic, so that we don't see a tremendous spike in the additional people getting themselves tested.
And let me add to that, if they are symptomatic, it actually does make sense for them to report it, because then, teachers can excuse them for, the days that they are missing. And it helps, it helps them, helps the teachers understand what's going on and help them, like either skip, have some excused work or, modified work. So I should add in my COVID update that the contact tracing team has been working hard, for sure. Okay, I'm going to stop sharing if there aren't any other questions. I just saw the button. I got it.
I'm going to drop a link to our April minutes. If members could just look at them, look over them, and then we could approve them quickly. And there are questions in there about the elevator that we documented, including if we've successfully resolved the South Building elevator outages. Do we need to plan additional maintenance to prevent future outages? Given the present number of students at Jones who have elevator passes included in IEP or 504 plans, do we have sufficient capacity for those students to make it to their classes on time? And is there a way to make the service elevator in the North Building available to students without having requiring a key to use it? So those were in the notes. Rachel?
I'm sorry to go back to the COVID update, but I just have a quick question, if it's all right. For Daniel, if he doesn't mind sharing or speaking on it. I'm just really curious, what is your sense of like students' feelings toward COVID right now, especially as we're kind of entering into the next surge? Because like from my perspective, like long COVID is kind of getting researched more, and for those who have it, it's like very serious. But for the asymptomatic group, COVID is no big deal. It's like a little cold. So yeah, what is your sense? I know you're just one student, but what is your sense of like how students are treating this like next surge?
I would say it's sorry. It's on a few students' minds. It's on students' minds for sure, but a lot of students have also moved past it. With the school year coming to an end and the weather being nicer, a lot of students have just started moving away from COVID being on their mind. But for sure, some students, and if not most students, are still like worrying about COVID, like, this whole new wave and the surge of cases and stuff like that. And also like just the underreporting, because I know that's been a big thing in the news as well. But yeah, a lot of students have moved past it as well.
Thanks.
Can we just get a show of hands for the approval of the April minutes? All in favor? Awesome. We just have a couple more things, including any updates to the regarding the whole school safety plan with Mr. Mitchell, and then we'll reserve the last part talking about recommendations from this committee to the next Health and Safety Committee. And then we were hoping to also get some answers to questions about culture and climate. And maybe Mr. Mitchell can help us with that. But are there any updates, Mr. Mitchell, regarding the whole school safety plan?
So I did not get to complete it, but I can, I guess, talk through some of the, what I was working on was more or less a kind of end of the year report. So reflecting on kind of what we wanted to be done with the whole school safety plan and what we actually accomplished. We actually did accomplish quite a bit, but wanted to kind of have it in a written form. So I can still submit that end of the year report. I don't know, I guess I can send it to someone tomorrow so you guys will have it. But as I said, I was working on that earlier today. So as far as updates, I broke down the whole school safety plan based upon the priorities that were listed. So priority one was making sure that all students felt or feel connected with staff and peers. And in the original plan, we mentioned the work with EOS in developing trusted adults. We mentioned school-wide student-teacher relationship lessons being developed through Eagle Lab and utilizing resources like Emoja, who's now called New Root, and also sharing SEL activities. So we looked at it like supporting teachers, and we looked at it in terms of things that we're doing with students. And so with the school-wide approach with building lessons and sharing SEL activities, I do think we completed that. We've gotten feedback from staff and students, and we're going to continue our partnership with New Root. What our next steps are, I don't have that detailed for you right now, but I can tell you that we've collected a lot of information to think about what are going to be our next steps. We think we appreciate the partnership we have with New Root as it relates to SEL activities. So having that partnership along with having Mr. Lopez and him bringing aboard or bringing back our Culture and Climate Committee, we definitely see some positive next steps moving forward. So again, tying it back to our whole school safety plan, those were some successful things I think that were completed. As far as the EOS data, EOS as a whole with our school was kind of paused. I actually had a conversation with some representatives of EOS today. EOS means Equal Opportunity Schools, for those who aren't familiar with that acronym. And basically, what we were going to do with the information from Equal Opportunity Schools was to use that data as a tool to support some of our decision-making as we move forward. Equal Opportunity Schools is real big on providing access for advanced placement as kind of like that marquee example of rigorous curriculum. And from a school perspective, we do a great job in terms of providing students with the access to the AP. What we need to kind of work on is once they get there, how are we best supporting those students through the AP? And so we need to look at that data a little more closely to figure out how we can better support students. So that did not really happen this year, but we're going to put some steps in place to make sure that we start to hit the ground running at the start of next year. So that was all of priority one. Priority two was focusing around making sure all students felt physically safe in the school. And so one of the recommendations was to hire an additional security team member and additional security measures added to vulnerable areas of the school. We have the staffing, we have the budget for a new security team member, but we did not hire one this year because we did not find someone who really met the criteria that we're looking for. The 9 security team members that we have currently all have a great balance of kind of the ability to build relationships and understanding students concurrently while kind of understanding how to make the building safe. And so we needed somebody who had that kind of balance and someone who could actually work the hours that we were looking for. Our security team doesn't just work a traditional, 8 to 3:15. We stagger our security team from as early as 7 o'clock in the morning to almost 8 or 9 o'clock at night. So those were all factors. And what happened is the 9 kind of worked overtime, like they worked harder. So we definitely need that 10th person. We will have, we're still looking to hire that 10th person for next year. Additionally, we've had some quotes made for some additional security cameras to better help see the perimeter of the building. And so we're looking and working with our business manager on how we might potentially finance that. So those are two things that are kind of still in the works, but it's still obviously making sure students feel physically safe in the building is something that is still a priority. Priority 3 was to make sure students have access to social emotional supports. And so our original plan mentioned to create a staff position that focuses on social emotional support. That is our culture and climate, our director of culture and climate, Mr. Lopez. So we did, complete that task. We're still fleshing out what his role is really going to look like. He came in on board end of January this year. And so he's done a lot of kind of triaging of supports, but we have the summer to try to kind of lay out what the next year is going to look like. As I mentioned previously, one of the things that he will help facilitate is our culture and climate team, one that will be staff focused and one that will be student focused. And so he's already started kind of soliciting support for those ventures. The other piece was, it says here our commitment to an SEL plan. And I believe we have been committed to a plan. If you were to ask me, what is it? If you were asking for a one pager, I don't know that I could provide that specific to you, but we've definitely been following kind of, some plans in terms of here's what we're doing for SEL. So like we did have school-wide SEL supports through Eagle Labs, and all those things were intentional. So we did, plan accordingly as it relates to, or I should say, we plan for some things in a more intentional matter for our SEL supports. Priority 4 was making sure we provided mental health supports for students. And there were 3 bullet points that we had recommendations. One was the development of a behavioral health team, which we did. We developed one, but we have not seen it really come to, I won't say to fruition, but we haven't really seen it be as engaging as we wanted to. This year, when we started our behavioral health team, we did it in partnership with the district. We worked in what's called a PLC, or professional learning community. And the professional learning community was geared towards the development and sustainability of behavioral health teams. And from a district perspective, some things kind of got paused. There were some things that happened that slowed the process down. So we did not move forward, but we have the bones of a behavioral health team that we're looking to really move forward for next year. Also, what we had listed was establish a community partnership with a mental health provider, working with the counseling department on a list of providers for potential on-site services. Or an additional social worker. Those are things that we asked for. We did get an additional social worker. So we have 2 in the building. We're really 1.5 or 1 3/4. But that's been very helpful in terms of our workload, or I should say, our caseload of students who need social emotional supports. As far as the community partnerships, again, that's something that kind of stalled with the district. And I don't know why, but that was something that we kind of signed up for, but it really never came to fruition. But we were able to keep afloat, like I said, with the supports that we had through our social work and the collaboration between our social workers and our counselors. So we definitely took a couple steps forward, and having this whole school safety plan, and referring back to it, I feel like we did, address a lot of we're heading in the right direction. So that is kind of the overall update from the plan that was presented, or the recommendations that were presented for this 21-22 school year, and now moving towards 22-23. We probably need to have a conversation about what are some additional recommendations for the upcoming year, besides continuing and following up with some of the things that we didn't see to fruition for this past year, and sustaining some of the things we already have. But are there some new concerns? And I saw in the minutes concerns or questions centered around student workload and things of that nature. Those seem to be specifics that will be kind of, I guess, taken on by perhaps the behavioral health team, or in partnership with Mr. Lopez. So that concludes kind of my updates.
Thank you, Mr. Mitchell. That was a lot. Does anybody have any? Yeah, Ms. Logan?
Okay, yeah. Mr. Mitchell, you've been very central to getting restorative justice at Jones with our peer counseling, peer conferencing. How do you envision that getting incorporated into the climate and culture plan?
I feel like that's more of a Mr. Lopez question to answer, but I mean, we've definitely, invested in restorative practices because we wanted students to have a little more voice, have a little more say so. And so working with, working with alternatives and other schools that can model for us kind of the way they've implemented. So we haven't necessarily figured it out exactly how we want to use it, but we know that it is going to be, an intricate part moving forward. We've had enough students get, an exorbitant amount of training. And so we've been kind of peppering opportunities and experiences, so far this year. But your question is kind of really how much or how we're going to utilize it for next year. I think it's still kind of up in the air, but I know for a fact that it is something that we plan on using. It was like we wanted to build capacity, and so we started that. We have quite a few students who are trained on some cultural building, and now we have some students who are more trained on conflict resolution type practices, and so now it's creating that space and opportunity. And so Mr. Lopez has had some experience with that, and so I think he has had some ideas. My hope is that whatever we plan to do, we'll reveal it in the opening week or weeks of school.
Great. Okay, thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for your contribution, because you've been a part of, supporting the restorative justice group. You've been to a lot of those trainings, and so we definitely want to keep you in the loop because you have been a part of all this, and you will continue. You have been continuing supporting. So whatever we do, you'll be one of the first to know.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Mitchell.
Rachel?
I just want to echo, I think it's exciting to hear restorative justice being brought up so much at Jones. I hear it in the LSC meetings a lot from students. I hear it from Daniel. I hear it from Alexandra. I hear it from Mr. Mitchell, Mr. Logan, and Mr. Feely. So that's just really exciting that it's like consistently being brought up as something to consider. But in line with the whole school safety plan, that was definitely the goal, would be to bolster that program. And I'm curious because one of the goals of the plan was not just additions, but it was also removals. And I just kind of think it's a question I have just for a year after implementing the plan, in which we and the local school council made the decision to remove the 2 school resource officers. I'm really curious to know, was that the right decision, and how does the school community feel about that decision 1 year out? In I think the conversation about restorative justice and the peer conference circles is the restorative justice circles is totally related to that. But yeah, I just kind of wanted to ask specifically, what is this, has there ever been a moment this past year when the resource officer's absence was critical or critically felt? I guess that's my question.
I guess being the only administrator on this call right now, and being involved in many of the incidents that happened in this school building, I would say that there have been several instances in which having a resource officer would have been extremely helpful. Response time to certain things just took a little bit longer. This speaks highly of our security team, because without resource officers, I won't say jeopardized, but they definitely went above and beyond to ensure the safety of our students. And I wouldn't want to have to put them through another year of that, because I want to look out for their safety as well, and the safety of other teachers. When we have some mentally ill people around the perimeters of the building, you know, and they're near the entrance, you can call 911, but how quickly can they get there? If you have a resource officer there, they can address that situation immediately because they're right on the ground. And I'm just using that as an example. And those are some things that have happened. And instead, what ended up happening is security, you know, kind of had to kind of team up while someone's calling 911 to kind of intervene. And again, that's just not a position I would care to put our security team in on a regular basis. So you ask kind of a multi-layered question. Was it the right decision versus, you know, what are some things that occurred? So I'm telling you that there were, you know, several instances where having a resource officer would have definitely been beneficial. So that is kind of my 2 cents. Do I think, you know, because of the decision that was made, there were definitely some positives. Mr. Lopez is definitely value added. You know, could we have added him without having the removal of SROs? You know, so we're still looking to see, you know, how much more value added Mr. Lopez will be. But there's just been an uptick in criminal activity in the South Loop area as a whole, and it's definitely strained our abilities in terms of as it relates to the physical safety of the building. You know, when we developed the whole school safety plan, it was to reimagine safety as a whole, not just thinking about physical safety, but the other elements as well. And so I can appreciate that, and I can appreciate the things that we put in place to help support that. But at the end of the day, some of the kind of physical safety elements that the you know, resource officers helped support, you know, it was definitely more of a struggle this year.
Thank you.
Daniel?
Yeah, so I can't speak on like what Mr. Mitchell was talking about because I don't know what a lot of the security team does.
That's why they're good at what they do.
Yeah.
Because you don't know.
Yeah, so they've been doing a good job. But I can say that students are aware of what Mr. Mitchell said at the end of how, like, you know, there has been like an uptick in crime around Chicago as a whole, you know, the whole curfew now in place and stuff like that. So a lot of students have been aware of it, and there's been a little bit of talk that I've engaged with. But for the most part, it's not like no one has blatantly said, oh, we need SROs now, you know? But there has been that, like, oh, they could have been here, you know. There was one moment where I do remember like a time there was a homeless woman around the school and she was kind of harassing students. And so that was like, wow, like, you know, but overall, it's not prominent on a lot of students' minds, you know. Mr. Lopez, like Mr. Mitchell said, has been a big addition to the team. And I think a lot of students are also feeling that. So I think that might be overshadowing effects of like the lost SROs. But you know, people have thought about it.
So Logan.
So I had 2 points I wanted to try to remember. So the first one was, I thought I remembered when we were talking about the whole removal of the SROs, that there would be other things we could do if we felt like we needed more help. Like we could contact our alderman, or we can contact, you know, the police station, the nearest police station, like on a you know, like, so that we could actually get additional help in some way. Does anyone else recall that conversation? Okay, and so that was one thing. So if this is really, like, if we don't have the SROs and we feel like we need extra security, then we probably should figure out what those extra things were so that we can try to implement them. So that's one thing. The second thing is, like I was going to say, you know, the removal of the SROs, it's hard to sort of see the opposite of like with a lot of the public health things. It's hard to see, like, if we didn't have masks or if we didn't have vaccinations, like the SROs, it's sort of hard to see, like, you know, what if they had stayed in the environment that we're in what additional stress and circumstances could have arisen, right? It's because, right, I mean, having not removed them at that point might have been very traumatic as well, right? So that's all I wanted to say.
Thanks. I'm not sure if Rachel or Mr. Mitchell was up.
I would like to let Mr. Mitchell respond because I think he's probably going to respond to the additional safety thing.
Yeah. What was suggested and we, tried, and it's kind of a hit or miss, is getting some additional attention sometimes after school. So we had reached out to the first district, and they're fairly responsive, but that wasn't something that was going to be guaranteed on a daily basis. Yeah, that was one of the things. And again, the hiring of the 10th security was to make sure that we had, because we had different procedures at the beginning of the year in terms of entry and everything. So as COVID protocol shifted some, security was able to do certain things, and so give us a little more flexibility. But as it relates again to the safety element, again, we're now tied to calling 911, and we're put in a queue, and so if there are other emergencies that come before us, it can take a while. So using the example that Daniel mentioned in terms of the homeless person who's mentally ill and was harassing students, security kind of got this person away after they had tried to harass our students. So they managed to shoot this person away. They had called 911, and I think it took them 15-20 minutes before they arrived. And anything could have happened with this mentally ill person. Thank goodness nothing did, but that's just one of those examples. Whereas if there were someone on site, how certain things could have been handled. But hindsight's 2020. We could sit here, go back and forth. As I said previously, when challenged or asked to kind of reimagine what safety looked like, and enveloping the mental health support, not just looking at safety from a physical standpoint. A decision that was made to attack all three of those things. And so with that being said, the plan and recommendations we made, I think we definitely headed in the positive direction. I think that we probably could still use a SRO conversation. Is something that some of the adults probably, and I've had a lot of parents call and talk about that and ask that question, why did we remove them, kind of thing. But moving forward, this is where we are. If there was an opportunity to reinstitute, I think it would be worth us having that conversation and eliciting, more data points as opposed to one adult here or one adult there, and really see if that was something of value. I know that the removal was because of student feeling, as it relates to the SROs. I also know that if we were to, take a step back and do something like this, the question or concern would be, how would this be different? How would this be different than it was before? What would these SROs bring to the table outside of the physical safety realm? How would they build relationships with students? So we, all of that would have to be fleshed out. But I'll leave it at that.
Rachel.
Yeah, I just wanted to kind of bring up some of the data that we looked at last year to kind of ground this conversation, because I think one of the things that we talked about, and I just wanted to put into context, was students who attended the safety forum. The number one priority for them was transparency. They wanted more transparency around safety issues at the school, but then also just kind of the teacher survey data and the parent survey data just showed a very mixed, very, very divided response in terms of the need. But one thing I just think is important to remember is for some students and parents, like physical safety at the school was more negatively impacted by the resource officers being there. So it was not a consensus that having the resource officers there was a safety, the physical safety benefit. And I think that's kind of a one piece I just didn't want to get lost. Like kind of something that Ms. Logan was speaking to, which is it's hard to know how people feel now because there's an absence, which is why I wanted to ask. I know it's a hard question to answer, but I just wanted to bring that up. And yeah, in terms of the transparency, that's something that I don't know if it's appropriate to say now, but for the next health and safety committee, student transparency around security issues at the school, like I totally understand, there's a fine balance between informing students of what's going on and raising concerns among students by sharing too much with them. But that was something that really struck me more so than any conversations about restorative justice or school resource officers. Students were just like, we want to know more what's going on at the school.
Can I just add one thing as well? I find this committee so super useful to the school, and that I hope that members who continue to raise these types of issues and questions and insights continue to, if it's not these members, other members like you continue to keep engaged with the school in these committees or in what other forms is available. Again, thank you to this committee.
Yeah, thank you to this committee and for all the groundwork you've laid down. I understand that this committee didn't exist in the LSC in the past ever. I was brought in after you've done all this work already, and reflecting now on what you've done has been really monumental, and especially when you think about it in terms of how the district is doing overall, and how other schools are talking about what does it mean to have SROs in the school, that the LSC was able to take a vote at all. I think it just addresses the engagement of the whole community, including parents, teachers, administration, and students, that we were able to put a vote forward and make something happen, and also follow up on it like this and reflect on it so that we can benefit all, the whole body. And early on this year, we took a vote to center racial equity and inclusion in this committee also. So I just wanted to tie in that idea to health and safety, because it is, we do have now, because we got rid of the SROs and replaced, as Rachel is talking about, and Mr. Mitchell is talking about, with a climate and culture coordinator. But what does it mean to have a climate that is not just physically safe for students and teachers and staff, but a culture that welcomes all, and including all races and class and gender and identity and all of that. It is a whole holistic approach that we are trying to do here. So and I understand that we achieve our goals when we put things into little buckets, but how is it that we can keep this conversation going in a way that centers the humanity of people? Yeah, because there's so much work to do, and so many other people that we want to bring into this conversation, including Mr. Lopez, which we didn't, it's past 7 right now, and this is supposed to be our last meeting, but I do want to go to the questions that we put forward to Mr. Lopez, but first, before I I do that, again, I wanted to thank everyone here for all of your work. And, again, to the point of how is it that we can move forward together? We have a lot of data. We have a lot of surveys. We have invested in anti-racist training, for the betterment of each and every student, but also the staff, who have to be here, and their safety and their mental health is also at stake. So, so I just, again, wanted to thank you for all of that. I'm going to share my screen just so that we can look at, in the short time that we have together here, is the questions for Mr. Lopez. And there were 6. I think that we talked a little bit about some of these things, including the restorative justice or talking circles. And this, the question number 2 would be, how are we bringing in students' voices into our conversations? This is something I'm interested in hearing. Maybe you will, Mr. Mitchell, you're talking about strategizing throughout the summer. This is something maybe you are going to talk about then.
I can give you a quick brief. I mean, I spoke to it very, very briefly when I talked about Mr. Lopez. One of the things that we are going to have next year, we're reinstituting, because we had it previously, but our school culture and climate team, and Mr. Lopez will be spearheading that. He's looking for some teacher support, and when I last spoke to him, his vision was to have kind of a staff-based culture and climate team and a student-based culture and climate team. And there will be times where they'll collaborate, collectively. But there's definitely that opportunity for student voices to be heard. Mr. Lopez, in the short time that he's been there, has made himself very available and present to a lot of different students. And he has already tried to create some sense of togetherness, and just reminding the students that they have a voice, even when he's dealing with some conflicts. So there's some things that are already in motion, and there are definitely some things that we're moving forward or looking forward to do in the future. So that's just one example as relates to question number 2.
Thank you. And then we talked a bit about the whole school safety plan, removing the school resource officers. And then, yeah, this is something that we talked about a little bit already, but maybe, Daniel, if you wanted to comment on this at all. But maybe this is also something that will be a survey, for instance, that the Culture and Climate Committee puts forward to the students. Seniors will be gone. So I don't know if there is any opportunity to get their input before they leave. And then the question number 5 would be about the social media expectations manual. That's pretty cool. But I think that just points to, what are the behaviors of our student, staff, family in general? Like, how do we behave with each other in person all the way to online? And then the last part is something that I was talking about, which everybody is suffering right now, including those who are houseless. But regarding mental health concerns for both students and staff, and how does that tie into the whole school safety plan? So these are all questions that we were hoping to discuss with Mr. Lopez. I don't know, Mr. Mitchell, is there anything else that you wanted to comment from this document?
No, I mean, question 5 is definitely something that he and the school leadership team have had some conversations about. And but there's nothing that I can specifically update you, because I know he's working on that. But social media usage and appropriate social media usage consistently is one of our larger disciplinary issues, and it impacts our school culture and climate. Kids say and do things on social media, and the ripple effects just impacts so many different students. And so we're trying to, I guess, kind of a two-pronged approach. One of it is dealing with the incidents in real time and, trying to repair the harm for those situations. But we're also looking at it from a preventative lens as well. How can we educate students on the front end to not do these things in the first place? And I think the manual that Mr. Lopez is looking at, it's going to be leaning more towards that perspective, really more of a preventative approach. I know that currently our counselors approach it from a post-secondary, like, hey, you're getting ready to go off to school. Colleges do, look over or look through the internet, and things that you post can end up at a university's, attention. So there are those kind of warnings, but really kind of walking through various scenarios and really, sharing with students and with parents the expectations, because I don't know that some parents are aware that these things are happening until it's happening to their child. And they become very aware of their impact. But just generally speaking, I don't know overall parental understanding of some of the how social media, it can be so detrimental for some of our students. So again, that's something that he's spearheading, but has the full support of school leadership, and we'll figure out some ways in which, like I said, from a two-pronged approach, dealing with certain things in real time and a more preventative approach. And then the last question around mental health concerns, I'm not sure that is something that Mr. Lopez is would be able to address. That last question kind of speaks to sounds like you're asking, should that be a part of the whole school safety plan, and then what we're going to do. That's not something that I would see as a part of his role directly. I think that's more so something that would be addressed from our counselors, our social workers, and like the behavioral health team, which was addressed in the whole school safety plan. So mental health concerns, I think, will be something that team will help address and figure out maybe some school-wide supports. And I guess that would be it.
Daniel?
Yeah, just in regard to question 5, the social media, I agree with Mr. Mitchell. I feel like this is one of the biggest areas to tackle in our school climate. And for me personally, what I would like to see in that manual, if Mr. Lopez listens to this, or Mr. Mitchell, if you can pass this on, more of documentation on what's the proper way to document anything online that you might not feel safe with, or that is causing harm to you, and how you document that, and how do you get that to administration or to a trusted adult and stuff like that. Just that proper channel is what I would like to see with the manual.
Thanks for that, Daniel. I just wanted to respond real quick. I'm hoping from a leadership perspective that the district legal and just kind of from a legal standpoint that they're able to provide schools with a little more teeth about when you do or if you should do these kinds of things, what can happen to you. Because as it stands right now, because social media falls under free speech, right, there's very little, that we can actually do. We have bullying, and cyberbullying, and those things are in the handbook. But it takes a process to prove, and then when you're talking about technology, how do you know that it was this person's account versus a bogus account? There's just so many layers to all of that it's very difficult to, I guess, provide a level of consequences to those who are doing it that would, encourage them to stop it. So that's why we're trying to take the approach of just really educating, everyone. And to your point, you asked about how students can document. I think if we have more students who are a little forthright on social media in the moment, and just be like, hey, chill, that's not cool. We're not going to talk about people like that here. Or we're not going to do that here. So if more students feel empowered to kind of talk to their peers, to nip that in the bud in the moment, that might be helpful. Because once you hit send, it's no longer yours. and people screen grab, screenshot things, and there's a waterfall effect. And we could resolve an issue in a week or two, and then it pops back up 2 months later. Or in some students' cases, I mean, I got a video of a kid who said or did something from his freshman year, but not everybody knew it was his freshman year. But it was alarming, and we had to address the seriousness of it. But at the end of the day, it was something that this kid had posted from their freshman year that they had deleted, that one of their friends had reposted it because they thought it was going to be funny. And then like a whole new, generation of people are now seeing this for the first time, and it caused panic. It caused, just a lot of, and that took a week to try to resolve, but that is kind of the ills of social media and social media usage. So when we talk about the expectations, hopefully we can kind of talk about that in that manual. Like I said, again, what to do in the moment, to your point, like, how do you properly document, screen grab everything, and then submit that. You can send it in an email. If you are to report it to OSP, you would email them, and you can attach the documents that way. So to your point, we can walk through those procedures, like I said, while concurrently kind of building this culture of let's not do this. This is not what we do at Jones. Thank you for that.
Thank you for that. Please.
Ms. Logan?
I just wanted to ask if there were any models, like, are there any high schools or colleges nationwide doing anything that you can like sort of build from?
No, Ms. Logan, not that I'm aware of. I feel like everybody is struggling with this right now. I mean, I don't think anyone there's not a model that is more effective than others. Because like I said, there's not enough legal teeth, like you can basically get away with saying whatever you want online. Like there's very little. I mean, there's a few for certain things like threats, but this kind of cyberbullying or just inappropriate comments and things that are made on social media, there's not a whole lot that makes kids not want to do it. Like there's nothing that really scares them. Now at the collegiate level, you can get kicked off for, that might scare some of them, but at the high school level, there's really not a whole lot there.
Thanks. Thank you.
But that's a great question. Thanks for asking.
Thank you for that. I'm going to, I think that I shared this into the agenda questions, but if I didn't already, I will share that now. Because I think that this is great to start here at the next committee meeting to talk further about this. But it does remind me that we're at the end, close to the end of this meeting. And we were hoping to wrap up, the year with a couple recommendations. I know it would be really hard to do. Here's the link to that document for the questions, and feel free to add to it. But of the participants here, thank you for being here. And I learned a lot coming to these meetings, and I'm very hopeful that Jones is going to be able to implement a lot of the things that you all started with this committee. But do you feel that you are prepared to, at this time, just put forward a couple broad strokes of things that we should be thinking about for next year? I know, Daniel, you will not be here anymore. So I think that your voice is, I'm interested in hearing from you for sure. Rachel?
Yeah, I asked the question on the doc, question 5, because I just feel like the social media question. I remember when we were meeting to talk about the hiring of the culture and climate coordinators. The question, I was like, what's the biggest problem? And the answer was unequivocally social media. So I think turning toward that for the Health and Safety Committee, although on its face, it doesn't seem like the most directly related concern to health and safety. It actually, it is. And that's just like something we never really, we talked about this past spring, but last year we didn't discuss it at all really on the committee. So yeah, that's just like one thing. It's to like actually seriously look at that. And to Ms. Logan's question, is there anything that we can look at for models basically? And maybe that's something the committee can work on putting together.
Great. Deborah?
I would like to suggest, even though I'm not formally a member of the committee, I would like to suggest that there is an ADA IEP 504 component of health and safety that is really a health and safety emphasis in addition to any kind of equity or access type emphasis, and would love to see this committee continue to have those conversations. Whether I'm a member of the committee or not, I will pop in from time to time because this is an area of personal importance to my family. And as I start talking with other families whose students have related issues, I think we need to make sure that those voices get amplified and heard, because it's easy to ignore some of the things that don't affect all families. But for those families that these things affect, it really becomes mission critical to getting through the school day. So that is an area that I would really love to see continued discussions separate from the equity committee. I think there's a piece of that belongs here.
Thanks, Deborah. Daniel?
I just want to say first thing, Deborah, thank you so much for bringing that up. And I also agree with you. If I'm gonna be honest, before this committee and before having you hearing you speak, I haven't really thought about ADA compliance a lot and that factor. And now I find myself going to the movie theaters. I'm like, okay, where are the wheelchair accessible seats and stuff like that? So I just want to say thank you for that. But I think one thing that this committee can do also is try and engage in I don't diversity almost. Because I know at Jones there are a lot of cultural clubs, and they have events and stuff like that. So I don't know, probably get engaged with that somehow, or research possible diversity trainings. I don't know, just because I think that's something that Jones in general can really tackle, and the health aspect of it, of mental health and stuff like that. So something like that maybe.
Yeah, thanks, Daniel. Yeah, I feel like COVID has really, thrown us all. Especially at Jones, where a lot of the families it's a commuter school, basically drop the kids off and then leave. We should be more involved in many of the clubs that exist at Jones. Because really, as you say, that's really where a lot of students find real relationships, not online. This is where your memories are being created and really in real time with others that share your interests. For this short period of time that you're together, how is it that we can amplify that? That's where people should be bringing their energy, and not, less time on social media, but also dealing with the disinformation and bullying that's there, but creating real relationships at the school. So I agree with you on that. Well, I think that we are at the end of this call, unless anybody else has any other announcements or anything that we forgot. And I want to again say thank you to Daniel and Deborah for coming today and for presenting on ADA the last two meetings, and Cynthia for co-chairing this committee, and Rachel for standing this committee up, and Mr. Mitchell for all of your updates on the whole school safety plan. And I really appreciate your engagement with this team. That's it. Let's adjourn. Anybody opposed to adjourning? No. All right. Have a great night, everyone.
Okay, everyone.
Bye, everyone. Thank you.
Bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye.
Bye.